Welcome to another Achieving Science video. This video is going to look at the control of body temperature. Let's use an example. Think of doing exercise. Think about the ways your body changes, so describe these changes. And then begin to explain why these changes occur. Hopefully by the end of the video you'll be able to describe and explain why these changes occur. If we take an example of running, when we run we begin to sweat more. We also begin to breathe more heavily. This is an example of our body beginning to control what's happening. Your body is trying to maintain a constant internal environment. This is called homeostasis. But why does it do so? Why is this so important? Well, this is important because the conditions inside your body need to be kept steady to allow the cells to function properly. Therefore, a balance between what goes in and what comes out needs to be maintained. Body temperature then. When you're hot, you need to get rid of excess heat. When the environment is cold, you need to retain heat. But how is this done? Well, this is done through the body carrying out a process called negative feedback. Inside your brain there is a thermoregulatory centre. Thermo meaning heat, so regulating the heat. It acts like a thermostat. It is able to monitor the temperature of the blood, and it also receives information from the temperature receptors in your skin. It's able then to trigger a response that counteracts that change that it detects. E.g., a rise in body temperature would cause a response which would lower the body temperature. Therefore, it would maintain a constant internal environment, which we call the norm, the optimum temperature at which cells work best. It is, though, not capable of working outside of a certain range. There are certain limits, where it becomes either too hot or too cold, and this results in hypothermia and heat stroke. Closer look at negative feedback then. If we look at this as a graph, so we look at time going across, we look at body temperature. We want our body to maintain a normal level, 37 degrees Celsius. Now our body temperature could rise and it could fall, and we can show this on a graph. So with a rise we can detect it. We can see an increase, our body can see an increase in blood temperature or temperature receptors on our skin. Our body will then respond to counteract that increase and decrease the body temperature back to its norm. If the body temperature then goes too low, again, that decrease is detected by the thermoregulatory centre in our brain and our skin receptors. And that will trigger a response to happen that will counteract that decrease. Body temperature then. Normal. What is normal? 37 degrees Celsius is normal. What chemicals aid digestion? And in the digestive system you have amylase, lipases and proteases, for example. These are all examples of enzymes. What temperature do these work best at? Well, these all work best at 37 degrees Celsius, and this is why we need to maintain a constant internal environment, a constant body temperature. Well, what happens if it's not? Well, if it rises too much, our enzymes become denatured and no longer work. Therefore, our cells may die. Where an enzyme becomes denatured, this is where it changes the shape of its active site. Its active site therefore no longer matches its substrate and it no longer works. Now the brain has its own personal thermostat that is sensitive to blood temperature. It's also receiving constantly feedback from our skin, our receptors within our skin. So it's able to regulate our body temperature constantly. Our skin plays a major role in this. You can see within our skin there are sensory receptors near to the surface. There are nerves which carry the impulses to our brain. We've got arteries carrying blood to the skin and veins carrying blood away from our skin. We've also got hairs that lie on the surface of our skin. So what happens when we get too cold? Well, when we're too cold, our hairs begin to stand up on end. This traps a layer of air which acts as an insulating layer, kind of like wearing a woolly jumper. You produce very little sweat. We don't want to be sweating, because that would allow heat to be transferred to the environment. We don't want blood flowing near the surface of our skin, so our blood vessels constrict, and so less heat can be transferred from our blood to the surroundings. You will begin to shiver as your muscle cells begin to respire more to try and generate more heat, and you might also have a behavioural effect that actually you begin to put more clothes on to try and keep warm. You might huddle together. The other extreme is then when you get too hot. This time our hairs will lie flat. We don't need the air to be trapped. We don't need an insulating layer. We will produce sweat. This sweat would evaporate and therefore allow the transfer of heat to the environment. Our blood vessels near to the surfaces of the skin would open up. This would allow more blood to flow to the surface of the skin. This is where you might appear more red-faced, for instance. This allows more heat to be transferred from the blood to the surroundings. Finally, you might have the behavioural effect that actually you stop. You might go to somewhere in the shade. You might also begin to take clothes off to try and cool down.